Remember, he won the Delightful Dunedin Award, so it's good to see Jeff again. DCO, I've been a member since 2014, when our bank, Platinum Bank, if you remember, on 580 in Dunedin, next to the neighborhood Walmart, opened. Since that time, things have been changing, as life always changes. The banking world has changed for myself. Went from a small community bank, and I don't know if we could pull up on your table too is some useless information that talks a little bit about the bank that everybody loves to talk about, hey, who we are. But we went from a very small bank to now South State Bank is 45 billion, which probably nobody in this room knew or knows that we're the largest bank in the state of Florida that's headquartered in Florida. And no one in this room would know where the headquarters is except Victor. It's in Winter Haven. I mean, no one would ever guess that. Winter Haven houses the largest bank in the state of Florida. We're over like 5 states. We have a bunch of offices. And, that's a good thing. For Pinellas County, where Victor and I are, we have 3 offices in Pinellas, one on 580, one in Palm Harbor on 19 in Alderman, one on Tampa Road in Oldsmar, and then we have an office in Trinity. So really for you guys, that's what's important. We have offices in Hillsborough and Sarasota and across the state of Florida. So it's a good thing going from a small bank to a big bank, which I was very reluctant. I'm a community banker. I like community banking. I didn't want to be a part of a regional bank, but here I am. We have now a full array of products that we can offer that we didn't have in the community bank. Treasury management and investments and things like that. Online banking is as good as anybody's. Again, that's important. Less and less people are coming into the bank nowadays. 30 years ago, for me to stand up here, and I've been in banking that long, like I am right now, people would go, oh my goodness, because we always wore coat and ties. And now we never wear ties. And if I show up in a tie, somebody thinks I'm going to a funeral or something. But a banker, we always wore coat and tie. So banking has changed. People don't come into the office as much as they used to. It's not an event for them, so you do everything online, which is a great thing. Our young people can't even write a check, and they love online banking. So we have that, which is very good. The thing that really sets at any organization, which sets it apart, are the people. 3.5 years ago, Victor came to this bank, and our office there on 580, if you've ever been inside there, and I know a number of you bank there, that's what makes us different, is the people. You have Victor Lucas. You come into that bank, you're going to see Victor. His staff does a great job, and he can do all the consumer residential type things that you need. I do commercial lending, and so I'm housed there because of that. But for you guys, Victor Lucas is who you need to come see. I'll close with a story. There was a guy, I told this story before, if you've come to our business after hours. We had that every year in January. It was well attended. We got to get back to doing that again. But there was a guy that needed a heart transplant. So the doctors offered him 3 hearts. One was a world-class marathon runner. The other one was a professional soccer player. And the other one was a 90-year-old banker. So they asked the guy, which heart do you want? He said, I want the 90-year-old banker. And the guy says, why? You can have these world-class athletes. He said, well, I know the banker's never used his heart. So what we say at South State is we use our heart. So thank you very much.
All righty, and now I'm really excited about this program today. We have Chantel Bajan Yay, from Salty Science. And she's going to get us started.
All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. So, yeah, I'm part of this group called Salty Science. We are a group of 4 women who are in December this year rowing across the Atlantic in a boat just like this. We'll get to that photo in just a second.
There you
So what we say is that we are rowing across an ocean, the Atlantic, for the oceans. We are all marine biologists. We're raising money for marine conservation. Can I help here?
Yeah.
Yeah, here. I do this for a living.
Oh, good. Yeah, I don't speak Windows.
Can't do this. Here.
Right, but it's getting it on the Zoom.
Oh,
Yeah.
what did you need to do? Yeah.
Device. Oh, Larry.
All right, so what I'm going to do this morning is talk to you about who we are as a team, why we're doing what we're doing, and it's for the challenge. It's also for marine conservation. So starting, I'm Chantal Bégin. I'm a marine biologist. I'm a sailor. I'm a dive instructor. I spend a lot of time on the water, in the water. I'm also an instructor at USF in Tampa. So I teach marine biology. I teach intro to, I teach a lot of intro level courses, and teaching is really my passion. That is what I focus on. Thank you so much. So here we are, who we are, what we're about to undertake, what the challenge is, and what specifically we're doing this for, what the marine conservation efforts are that we're supporting. So as a group, Salty Science, we're 4 marine biologists, and so this is my entire team. We're a pretty interesting team, actually. We're a sort of 3 academic generations. This woman here, Isabelle Cote, will be 61 when we row across this December. She was my PhD advisor. These 2 here were my students at USF. So Isabel taught me, I taught them, and now we're a happy growing family together. So yeah, so I've been working in marine biology for a few decades. I sailed full-time for some years, sometimes with little kids in tow. I'm a National Geographic explorer. National Geographic sponsored some of the research that I've done in the Caribbean, some of it based on the one sailboat. My day job is at USF. I do a lot of things on the side, it turns out. So sometimes I teach these large enrollment, biological diversity, intro level bio courses, but I also take students to the Caribbean every year for a field tour because our marine biology students want to also learn in the field. So that's what where my passion lies in marine biology. And this ties into what we're doing with Salty Science because we're raising money for marine conservation, but all of the organizations that we're working with have a strong component of education because we really believe in educating the next generation. Lauren, who was my student at USF, she's also a sailor. She spent a few years sailing. Just now, she's a dive instructor. She just went back to school at the University of British Columbia. She's working in fisheries economics. Noelle, also my past student, she's in Fairbanks, Alaska now as a marine ecologist and GIS specialist there. She's a Sea Grant Fellow at the University of Alaska. She describes herself as a type 2 fun enthusiast. I didn't know the term, but type 2 fun is a kind of fun that is mostly fun in retrospect. So very tough. Those sorts of things in the moment. And that's the kind of stuff that she's into. Maybe rowing across an ocean will be part of that. Isabelle, everybody's amazed that she'll be 61 years old, but she's probably the toughest of us all. She's an endurance swimmer. She does ultra marathons all the time in the mountains of British Columbia. She's an endurance swimmer as well. And she's a professor of marine ecology at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia. So this is what we're about to undertake. So we have a boat just like this. I live just here in Ozona, by the way. I teach in Tampa, but I live in Ozona. I'm really close by. I hang out at Dunedin all the time. My kid likes to skateboard at the park. Yeah. So we have a boat just like that in my driveway in Ozona. And we've been training on her. So what we're doing is we're rowing from the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa all the way to Antigua in the Eastern Caribbean. That's 3,000 miles or so. We're going to be completely unsupported. So this is a race. There's going to be about 30 boats doing this race in December. And there is one support boat, but really you're on your own. So we have to bring all of the food that we need for, well, we hope it's going to take 42, 45 days, but we're going to bring food for 55 days because you don't really know. We have solar panels. We have a water maker that desalinates water. We have electronics, all of the safety gear that we need, a life raft. If there's really an emergency, we need to be able to manage the emergency. So we're a team of 4. We're going to be rowing 24/7 around the clock in groups of 2, so 2 hours on, 2 hours off. They estimate that we're going to take about 1.5 million oar strokes across the Atlantic, and we need to eat about 5,000 calories a day. I tried 3,000 calories a day recently. It was hard. A lot of food. And so this is unsupported. And so we need to be able to tend to all of the issues that arise. I mean, this is typical hands of an ocean rower after a few weeks, but all of the injuries that might come about, all of the mechanical breaks that we might have, we need to have spares of everything. If your rudder breaks, you need to be able to fix it, all of that sort of stuff. And so it's a big challenge to do that, but just getting to the start line is actually really hard as well. We've been working on this project for 2 years already. We're leaving this December, so we have a little under 11 months left. So we've been doing a lot of training. Some of it is in our boat, but it's also a lot of strength training. We're working with a coach. That's at Concept 2, the rowing machines. It's a lot of logistics. So figuring out what we're going to eat, what we need to pack, what we need to order, how we're going to pack it. Figuring out, we went rowing last week, and we're going to try to go for 24 hours. And as we tested all of the equipment, we blew a fuse in the boat, lost all power, and we're still at the dock. But it took us 2 hours to figure out where that fuse was. So there's a lot of that also, right? And making sure that we have all of the fuses as backup after backup. And sponsorship and fundraising has been a big part of what we do. It takes money to do the race, but also we're raising money for 3 organizations. So we're doing a lot of fundraising. So we're rowing, of course, because we're all into these sorts of adventures. It's going to be quite the adventure. I mean, we can expect at some point probably 15 to 20 foot waves and some, big seas. That's what happens in the middle of the Atlantic. For those who are worried, this is a boat that is especially designed for ocean rowing. She will self-right if she capsizes. On average, teams typically capsize once a crossing, but this is a boat designed for that. But also, I've spent a lot of time offshore. I've sailed across oceans, and it's just amazing what you see when you spend weeks and weeks offshore. You see different kinds of wildlife, ocean sunfish and whales and flying fish. And so we're rowing because we're interested in that adventure. We're interested in pushing ourselves and in type 2 fun. And we're also rowing because we want to support marine conservation. So as a team, we are all academics in marine biology, and specifically, we've all focused on marine conservation. Our oceans have some amazing ecosystems, some amazing species, and unfortunately, a lot of them are at risk. In the last several decades, we've lost a lot of rather pristine ecosystems for a variety of reasons, and so we want to support those organizations that are doing good things for our ocean ecosystems. And so we are raising money for 3 different organizations. And you might think, well, why are you splitting your efforts 3 ways? Well, first off, it's so many great groups out there doing great things. It's hard to choose sometimes. But also, we're a Canadian-American team. So here's the accent, I'm French-Canadian. Originally, I'm also American now. My teammate Isabelle is also French-Canadian. So we have 2 teammates that are Canadians, 2 that are American. And the race ends in the Caribbean. We've all spent a lot of time in the Eastern Caribbean. So we decided that we should support organization in all 3 of these places. And so Green Wave is our American nonprofit. The Benfield Marine Sciences Center on Vancouver Island is our Canadian one. And Shellback Expeditions is actually a nonprofit that I started, but we work in the Eastern Caribbean. And most recently, our work has focused in the Grenadines, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So we're specifically trying to support 3 types of actions. We're trying to empower coastal communities to make good management decisions for their coastal resources, management decisions that are based in evidence and data. We are supporting diversity and access to opportunities in marine sciences. We want to make sure that students of all backgrounds, of all income levels, have access to these great courses that help them be trained in marine biology and conservation. And we want to support sustainable seafood production, which is super important for long-term sustainability. So there's along all these three lines. So first off, in the Eastern Caribbean, we focus on coral reefs, right? There's a lot of coral reefs there, and our coral reefs have declined a lot in the last few decades. So this is what coral reefs would have looked like a few decades ago. And now this is a more typical site. This is a photo that was taken in St. Lucia just a few years ago. You can still see little bits of live coral here and there, but there's a lot of dead reef. There's a lot of algae covering what really should be healthy coral reefs. And there's a few reasons for that. Climate change and bleaching events and overfishing and pollution is all parts of the problem here. But we're seeing some real degradation here. And importantly, we actually understand a lot of the stressors on coral reefs. We understand a lot of the solutions. So it turns out that we have a lot of the answers on what to do. And what we need is the right management actions, right? So Shellback Expeditions, which is a nonprofit I started, we work with local communities in the Eastern Caribbean. So you have some photos here from St. Lucia. I'm working now with a few nonprofits that are based in Union Island, a very tiny island of the Grenadines. We work with them to help them make the best management decisions based on data. So I'm diving with some of the rangers in St. Lucia. I work with my community group in Union, and I bring students from USF there, and we're collecting data. So this is a great thing because my students want to learn how to collect data. And we could just do the pretend thing where they write a report and I grade it and I never look at it again. Or what I do now is I go to the community partners and I say, what do you want to know? And they say, well, right now we just want basic stuff. Where's our coral? Nice. Where's our, just characterize these bays and tell us what's in them. So that's perfect. We've already collected the data, and now I have an undergrad researcher working on analyzing that and presenting it in a format that makes sense to our partners. Second problem, a lot of our wild fisheries are not sustainable. This is going to be particularly interesting to the group here in Florida. These are photos all from Florida. This was a PhD student worked on trying to reconstruct the changes in the reef fish in Florida. And what she did, because oftentimes we don't have scientific data dating back some decades, she went to the fishing charters and looked at the photos that they take with their guests at the end of every trip really. And she looked at the change in the composition of the catch, how the species have changed, but you can see how the size of the fish has changed from 1957 to 1979. The reason why we have smaller fish is that we've overfished. We've taken the big fish. Some of those, Goliath grouper could no longer be taken at that point. So some of the reasons for this is changes in regulations, but the change in regulations has to do with a change in the populations. We have a lot of bycatch that's associated with a lot of the ways that we harvest seafood. So a lot of our wild fisheries just have not been managed sustainably. And we think, okay, well, if catching fish in the wild often is not sustainable, maybe aquaculture is the solution, right? And so aquaculture has become much more important and prevalent. So you just put these pens here, you throw a bunch of salmon in them, and then you harvest the salmon and sell them. A lot of that marine farming is also not very sustainable. For example, because you have really high densities of salmon in these pens, you have a lot of diseases and parasites. And those diseases and parasites infect the wild salmon that come here. And so this is a photo from British Columbia. All of these are external parasites. And that has led to, so that's one problem, but also what you're seeing here, the mortality in the wild salmon here has to do with a virus that was introduced by farms. Also, if you're farming salmon, these are carnivores, so to feed them, you need to go catch wild fish, anchovies or whatever to feed, to turn into fish meal to feed the salmon. So a lot of that is not especially sustainable. But there are solutions here. Green Wave are American-based nonprofit. They're based in Connecticut, and they do what they call regenerative ocean farming. And so what they do is they do not farm large carnivorous fish. They focus on bivalves, scallops, mussels, oysters, clams, things like that. And importantly, seaweed. They farm a lot of kelp because kelp, you just need to hang a bunch of lines here, put a bunch of baby kelp on there in the right place. You're just going to grow this large kelp. And then if you have these scallops here, these mussels, some of the waste that they create, first off, you don't need to give them any food, so you're not overfishing. They're just filter feeders. They feed by filtering water and eating the plankton that's in it. And some of the waste that they create ends up being the nutrients for the seaweeds. I mean, it's a lot of basic farming techniques that we've known on land for decades, and that's the organic farmers are getting really good at applying again, but turning this into the marine environment. So Greenwave is doing some really great stuff, developing the right technique for farming kelp and these other organisms. They're also working on developing a market for kelp, because it turns out in North America, kelp's a great thing to grow, but we don't eat it, right? So they're developing a market for kelp as a food additive, as something that you can create plastic bag alternatives from. They have a kelp beer. They have all kinds of different things with this kelp. And importantly, they are working on scaling this up, and they are training a lot of potential kelp farmers and regenerative ocean farmers. So now they have all of these training courses for people in Alaska and all kinds of different places who want to start this in their communities. So Greenway is doing some great work on that front. And so we have a lot of stressors to our marine ecosystems. I talked about coral bleaching here. What you're seeing on the right is a healthy coral reef. And then a year later, a coral reef that has bleached with warming temperatures. The corals are really, really sensitive to heat. So when it gets too hot, they end up expelling the algae that normally live within their tissues. These algae provide about 90% of the food for the coral. So when they expel their algae, if that lasts for more than a few days, oftentimes it leads to coral death by starvation. And so corals are animals, can eat plankton and other things, but most of their food comes from the algae that photosynthesize for them. We know that overfishing has been a problem. We know that plastic pollution and pollution of all kinds is a problem as well. And so there's a lot of complex problems when we talk about sustainability and the marine environment. And we need a generation of marine scientists that are ready to think outside the box and tackle these problems and think of real solutions. And we really think, my team, that the more ideas and the more diverse ideas, the greater the likelihood that we're going to really come up with good ways to solve these environmental issues. So we really think that it's important to, one, train a lot of new marine scientists that are going to focus on marine conservation, but also train them for all kinds of different backgrounds, because people from different backgrounds think differently and bring different things to the table. So we think it's really important to support all kinds of people, including minorities, to study marine science. And here we're focusing on Benfield Marine Sciences Center, which is a research station and teaching station that's located on the west side of Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And they have an amazing setup for research and for teaching. There's a lot of field courses that are taught there. And specifically, as part of the money that we're raising for Benfield, we're creating a scholarship for underrepresented minorities in marine science, so that we can train more people who can, think of solutions and enact solutions. So we have a big undertaking, not just the whole growing across an ocean. We're trying to raise $500,000 for this and for the nonprofits that we're supporting. And we're over a quarter of the way there. So that's exciting. Out of everything we've raised, so in the dark blue, that's our remaining goal. We're going to get there. We've had a lot of corporate sponsorship, but also a lot of individuals have contributed $25, $100, and whatever they can. And we've had other fundraisers and donations some other ways. So we have several corporate sponsors. Nielsen, just here in Oldsmar, is our biggest corporate sponsor so far. We're really thankful for all of these corporate sponsors. And also all of the people who have donated a mile and sometimes more, including the North Pinellas Women's Club. Thank you so much. Donated a mile some weeks ago, and we appreciate. And so it's been a work of bigger organizations and lots of community support, and that has been awesome. So I'm here, I always love talking about Salty Science and spreading the word about what we do in our oceans. And we'd love, for whatever support you can give us. There's all kinds of different ways that you can support Salty Science. We're on social media. So if you're on Instagram or Facebook, we'd love for you to follow I see some phones may have been taken out. That's awesome. We'd love for you to follow our journey there. We're at Salty Science Rowing. So, of course, Salty Science, we're marine scientists, salty ocean. And so we're documenting the journey here. And if you're not, and you have kids who are on Instagram, let them know, tell people about us. Ooh, also, I'll pass this out, but I have a stack of cards here for anybody who wants our contact info. So check us out there. For those of you who are in various businesses here, if your business can sponsor us and consider sponsoring us, I would love to talk to you about that. Or if your business can't, but you have friends in other businesses, I would love to talk to you about that. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. So Shellback Expeditions, the nonprofit that is one of the ones we're sponsoring, is a 501c3 nonprofit. Salty Science is now a branch of Shellback Expeditions. So the money that we raise for this race can be, for the nonprofits, can be tax deductible. You can reach us over email, info@saltyscience.org. I got the cards here, I'll pass them out. And if anybody can sponsor a mile or know somebody who'd be interested in sponsoring a mile, please let me know. I would love to talk to you and anybody about what we're doing here. Oh, yeah, you can sponsor a mile for $100. So that's such a great question. Thank you for asking. So we have 3,000 miles that we are rowing. We would like to raise $300,000 for the row. So $100 a mile gets us there. Any questions?
Another one.
Yes.
Technical, and just take 1 second. I thought I read somewhere that coral reefs in Australia coming back. Was I wrong in that, or?
So that's a great question. The coral reefs in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef suffered some really massive mortality between 2015 and 2017. There was a bleaching event that lasted in the end really 2 years. So the 2 consecutive summers, there was a lot of mortality. Some places are recovering pretty quickly, others are not recovering as quickly. So a big question there is, what's the difference, right? What is the difference? Is it different species? Is the subsequent temperature variation, was that different at the various sites? And so there's a lot of variation in which places are recovering. And there's a lot of great research to be done there to understand that better. Overall, the Caribbean has lost a lot more coral than the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So a lot of the sites that I work at in the 70s would have had about 50% of the reef would have been covered in live healthy coral. A lot of the sites that I work at now are somewhere around 5 to 8%. So it's been a pretty massive decline. Yeah. Yes.
Can you tell us the dimensions of the boat?
Yeah, the boat is 28 feet long, and it's 5.5 feet wide. It's both quite large because it's a big vessel and a very heavy vessel to row, but also really small when you think about that being your only home for 4 people for 6 to 8. Talking about potential sponsors, you can see that this is a different team, but they have the names of various sponsors here, and that is definitely something that we do for sponsors. We acknowledge sponsors on social media and our website, but certainly this is a floating billboard, and there's quite a bit of room to put one's organizations on there. Yes.
When you're rowing, are you strapped in?
Great question. Yes, we are. So we basically, from the minute we leave the cabin, so the hatches, so this boat will only self-right if the hatches are closed and it doesn't start filling with water, right? So you need to keep those hatches closed. You need to be very disciplined about that if it's anything but super flat. And we have, so you can see there's these webbing lines here. We call those lifelines. There's a similar nylon webbing that's along the deck there that runs the entire length. And so you come out of the cabin and you have basically a climbing harness where the legs have been cut out. So it's just a waist thing. And we have a nylon webbing with 2 clips. And so it's clipped, well, 3 clips, 1 clip at your waist, 2 clips so that you clip in one place. As you need to move the clip, you don't even have to unclip temporarily. You clip the second one and then you keep going that way. So you can walk up and down with always being clipped in. So if you capsize, you might be quite uncomfortable, you might get banged up a little bit, but you're attached to the boat, and so you just get right back in. That's the biggest fear. The most dangerous part would be to be disconnected from the boat. Yeah. Yes.
How do you accomplish the navigation?
So the navigation is we're going to have multiple redundant things, but we actually have a chart plotter on board. We have autopilot also. So one of there's 2 solar panels, and they power everything we need: the satellite phone, the water maker. Well, they top off the batteries that then power all of these things. But we have a chart plotter, and we have the very low DC autopilot, and so we can just say, okay, now go 270 degrees, and when we don't like our track, we just go +1, +1, or -5, or whatever it is.
And you're fixing information. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. And we'll have backup handheld GPSs and backups to the backups. Yes.
I see the picture there. Where do you go when you want to sleep?
Right. So sleeping is in one of these 2 cabins. So 2 people share the bow cabin, 2 people share the stern cabin. This one looks short. It turns out that you can lay here, head here, you get to about your waist, and your legs actually go under the rowing deck in this one. It feels a little coffin-like. But yes, but you are out of the weather. Typically, 1 person at a time sleeps in the cabin, so there's in the rowing team, it's going to be 1 person from each cabin rowing at the same time, so that as you sleep, you're sleeping in separate cabins. You have a little bit more room. It's just when weather gets too bad, too rough to be on deck safely, then you shut the hatches, you put everything away, and you go below until weather gets better. So in that situation, you can have 2 people in a cabin at once. Yes.
You said you're leading in a group of about 30 boats. Are they all rowing boats, or are you coming across with a sailing?
Great question. So they're all rowing boats. The safety vessel that looks after the entire fleet is a sailboat. But for anybody, first off, they're all rowing boats. There are teams of 4, even sometimes 5. So you can imagine that pretty quickly the team of 4 or 5 men are going to be ahead of the slower groups. There's people who do this in 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. The single rowers and the doubles do it in a much smaller boat. Yeah, I think the single people are crazy. You just let it in your head, that's it. I like the idea of having some support with me. But the single women who do this on their own are going to be way far behind, right? So the safety boat can't be close to everybody. This year's race, there's already 5 or 6 boats that are done, and there's 1 boat, a single woman, who is just 1/3 of the way. And so, if you're in trouble, you can't rely on that safety vessel. Then it would be a mayday, and you deal with whatever is on that time. And the idea is to not get to a mayday, to be completely self-sufficient and prepared, so you don't get to that point. Yes.
So you mentioned you started in December.
That's correct.
And why did you pick December?
Great question. Why December? Because it's outside hurricane season, which and also, so oftentimes people also ask, why do you go from the Canary Islands to Antigua? That's with the dominant trade winds and dominant current. And in December, January, that tends to be when those trade winds and currents are the strongest. And so some might say, well, that's cheating. It turns out it would be basically impossible to go the other way in a rowboat. And so, right, it's at a time when you're unlikely to have major storms. Now, those trade winds do create some big seas sometimes. So we have to be prepared for 15 to 20-foot seas. That is likely to happen at some point. These boats are actually really good at surfing down waves and being very stable in those conditions. Yeah. Yes.
So how many of the teams are all women teams?
Great question. This year, so how many teams are all women teams? I mean, there's a single, there's a doubles. So this year, out of 30-ish boats, there's probably 4 or 5 that are all women of various size teams. Okay. Next year, something crazy happened. I think there are 7 teams of 4 women. And so there's going to be a lot of competition in the, in our group. Not that, winning is not our ultimate goal. We will, we're happy to cross safely. Or even like raise the money, have as good a time as you can and be friends at the end. So that so that for us is success, right? The teams that win do some crazy things, like rather than be 2 on 2 off. And I'm here to tell you, I did it last week. 2 hours on, 2 hours off is super hard because you don't get 2 hours of sleep. I mean, 2 hours of sleep max is hard, but of course you're getting off the oars. You need to eat something because you can't eat while you're at the oar. So that's when you eat, that's when you use a bathroom, that's when you clean yourself a little bit. So it's going to take at least 20 minutes to make, and you have to be up 10 minutes before your shift. So at best you have an hour and a half. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't just, fall asleep instantly. So I think the best I did in an overnight row last week was 45 minutes. Yeah. But some teams that really want to win, that's their goal. So there's actually 3 rowing stations there. So if conditions are bad, we can decide, all right, then now we need to push as hard as we can. And sometimes they will do three people on, 1 off, and we'll do that around the clock for a few days, which means that you have very little sleep at that. So it'll be interesting though, with 7 teams of all women, 4 women, the kind of competition that will arise from that.
Keep the boat from being too tippy, because it's kind of narrow. Does it have a keel or?
Yeah, so how do you keep the boat from being too tippy? There's enough ballast. That's why she self-rights. There's enough ballast to keep the bottom, the heaviest part. So if she tips over quite a bit, she wants to come back. And as you load her more, so right now our boat is pretty empty because we don't have all this food. So when we trained together in August, she sat really high on the water and she was really tippy. And not to a dangerous point, because she'll right, but it's a little uncomfortable, right? So this time around, I already bought my hurricane water for the summer. I bought all of this water and we put it all in the storage compartment to make her a little bit lower and more stable. So when the boats are fully loaded, they end up being that much more stable.
How much can the draw of these?
The boat draws probably 2 feet or so. And there is a center board, a dagger board. And so it's retractable. So that one goes down a little bit deeper. You don't actually need it unless you have crosswinds or you're trying to go upwind. Then you really need it to keep the bow of the boat. If you don't have those conditions, it ends up being faster to row without it because it's less drag.
So based on what you've described, is there a type 3 and a type 4 fund?
That's a great question. I don't know, but maybe Google is going to have an answer for me as to what type 3 and type 4 fun is. And I think I'm already over my time for this one, so.
That's fine. It's okay. That's fascinating. Round 1. Okay, I'm gonna do a mile. I challenge anybody else to help me do a mile. And then I just like to call Phyllis up here. We're just running a little bit behind time.